So, the story of my art. I don't really have much of a story. I've been drawing since I was 18 months old, family legend says. Usually boxes and squares that look like cars. Cars seem to be the theme in my entire life. Dad was a mechanic. I remember growing up, uh, crawling through old junk cars in the back of the Reedsport, Oregon auto shop that he worked in. Um, it was so far away from home that he would be gone for the week and then show up over the weekends and then go late Sunday night, or early Monday morning to get to work on time, driving his 1963 Corvair Greenbrier van. I still remember the smell of those vinyl seats because when I visit, I would sleep on the front seat. I can remember the texture of that seat. Um, yeah, good memories. Humid Oregon winters, humid Oregon summers. Yeah, waking up early in the morning, enjoying a cup of hot auto shop coffee. But yeah, cars have always been part of my upbringing from Hot Wheels and whatnot. So it seems to be part of an obsession with the art, like skulls and all that. Um, you would think somewhere along the line that consistency would dictate that I would do something with the art instead of making it a hobby, which is kind of what I'm trying to fix right now. Uh, you know, better late than never. You know, it's never too late until they put you in a box. But that's the thing. So I started drawing. What did I start drawing? Started drawing cars. Yeah, obviously cars. And then when I got into middle school and high school, I would start drawing comic books, and that correlated with starting to write. And I was like 15 when I started to write fiction, science fiction, obviously. If you were to psychoanalyze that, I would remember the back when television channels would sign off, there would be this montage video with some music, and then they would sign off, and then what was it, 11 o'clock, midnight, maybe. And I remember being so young and childish, or childlike, that, you know, there was this space shuttle like montage of this aircraft or the spacecraft going over a lunar space escape, and I always thought it was like a TV show, and I wanted to watch it. And then I was allowed to watch it, and it turned out to be the station signing off. But so, because I couldn't watch it, I would visualize in my head, like a bedtime story to myself, you know, the scenario that could happen. And that's kind of where the storytelling brain started to get into my head. And that's kind of like being three people, you know, the painting, which I didn't really get into the painting until high school. Hated acrylic. That was what was available. And then I inherited Dad's, because Dad went to Luther College, and he had a whole box full of this old oil paint. And first I just, you know, remember the love of the smell of the oil paint. And then I would, you know, going to art school, I would drag the paints along for the ride, and these paints were, geez, they were like 30 years old. A lot of them still work, you know, old Grumbacher. I think I still have some of the old antique tubes that have turned to cement because they're so old. I have his original brushes. Some of them are like torn up because I don't take care of anything anyway. And I got into oil painting in art school, and fell in love with it. Immediately, me and oil painting just kind of like clicked. Um, it seemed like everything. Gouache. There were some kids in some of the illustration classes that would struggle with gouache, and just like within like 5 minutes, I got it. I got the, whatever. But that's the thing, between the drawing of the cars and then what I assumed was going to be fine art illustration, which turned out to be a bust, mostly because of my lack of focus. And then the writing. So I would go through bouts of writing and completely neglect my drawing or my painting. And then I would go into the fits of drawing, which would neglect the writing and the painting. And then I would go into fits of painting, which would neglect the writing and the drawing. And then with the drawing, there is always drawing comic books or drawing weird sci-fi, surreal stuff. And then the writing was always sci-fi. And it wasn't until, what was it? 95 or 96, I stopped writing science fiction for a while and started writing other, more dramatic scenarios. So I would just bounce back and forth, and it seemed if you spend too much time making something you want to do for the rest of your life into a hobby, using jobs or practical occurrences, the regular living, as an excuse to keep it as a hobby because you don't have time to do it, then whatever. You realize at the age of 40 that, shit, your life is passing by. It doesn't really nail you in the head until you watch one of your parents die. And it's seeing the mix of anger, resignation, and regret in the face of someone who knows that time is up. Reliving all the things you could have done. Regret is the worst poison that could ever hit. So, whatever. Just avoid regret, or use it as a means of motivation. So, yeah, this is the one I plan on finishing next. It's been floating around for about a year and a half. I have a painting over here and a painting over there and a painting over here that could use finishing, but for the time being, this is the one that's going to be finished. I'm not quite sure the time frame. I should know the time frame. That would help out a lot, but yeah. So the surrealistic thing wasn't so much inspired by Salvador Dali as it was just an exercise. There is a unknown or forgotten science fiction author by the name of Alfred Bester, and one of the things that was kind of his trademark was taking the most impossible scenario and making it as realistic as he possibly could. And so that was blending body parts like the head with a hand, trying to draw it realistically. I think my sister has my first finished painting of a head and a hand. It was a piece of canvas my dad drug home from the factory he worked at, and I stretched that out on a piece of plywood with regular staples. Keeping up with the tradition of me doing everything the hard way. But, whatever. That's neither here nor there. Piece of history. But it's the process of blending contradictory things together into some kind of visual harmony. just to get this out of the way, I don't consider an awful lot of the modern stuff art. I don't. I consider early Jackson Pollock art, but I don't consider the paint diarrhea art. I don't. I consider Mark Rothko decorative, and I'm probably going to catch crap for saying it, but he's not art in the actual term that I would consider art. Um, Similar with the current Cy Twombly, I don't consider that art. Neither do I consider it sanity. $30 million for something a 4-year-old can do. I don't care what verbal magic and leaps of logic that could be used under the shield of jargon. It's not art. Just saying. The last great artists, and there are a lot of fabulous artists today that are not making $30 million on a piece of crap. You know, Picasso, great artist. Andy Warhol, an awful lot of the stuff I think is kind of bunk, but in totality, pop art I think was the last great movement in art. James Rosenquist was always a favorite of mine. Obviously Salvador Dali, the early Dadaists. So, I'm just tipping my toe into the wayward notion that I am going to be saying what is art and what isn't, and I'm an art school dropout. Clear the air there on that one too. Mostly because I found it boring and time wasting, and my second year illustration teacher said, she told me that I was essentially, my figure drawing teacher too, saying I was wasting my money, that I should be just out there doing it, because art is one of those things where you don't need the shield of validity that a piece of paper would give you. College these days is kind of a waste of money anyway. But just as an introduction to my resurrection of this painting from the oblivion of my wayward imagination and my lack of discipline. And the rest of this will be mostly stills of the painting's progress. I didn't set my watch right. It's about midnight, and it's been a long day at the day job. So I'll continue to work through this, but yeah, right at the moment it's kind of dark. I should have done this when I'm bright and bushy-tailed. But I figured, you know, the spark of realism of someone who's tired and rambling. So, on with the painting.